Hi, I'm John Davidson, lead pastor at Evangel Temple. Thank you so much for tuning into the message today. I hope it's a blessing and an encouragement to you. If it is, leave us a note in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed this message from God's Word today.
But in Luke chapter 19, we see Jesus nearing the last week of his life. And he has been traveling all around Israel, but now he is walking toward Jerusalem, where after 3 years of ministry, doing the supernatural and preaching and teaching and pointing people to God the Father, now he is walking literally to his death. He's going to walk into Jerusalem, where he's going to be crucified, nailed to a cross, and put in a tomb. And in those days before his crucifixion, as he is heading towards Jerusalem, one step at a time, he interacts with all these amazing people. Like if you go back a few chapters from Luke chapter 19, you see that Jesus comes across 10 people with leprosy and he heals them. And then as soon as that's done, you have all these parents bringing their children to Jesus saying, "Hey, Jesus, bless my children, bless my children." They saw him as a sage, a teacher, a rabbi, a prophet. They wanted him to bless their children, and so he did. He took time to do that. And then as he walked on towards Jerusalem, walking toward his death, he comes across a blind beggar. And whereas everybody else probably just walks on by and totally ignores this guy, Jesus stops and he interacts with him and he heals him. So along the way to his death, he's interacting with all these people that would be outcasts from society, people that nobody else would want to have anything to do with. And Jesus, in these final moments of his life, takes time with people that the rest of the world thought would be unimportant. And then we come to Luke chapter 19. And we see one more time, Jesus is going to have a very, very important interaction. And we know these interactions are important because all of us know that if we only had 1 week to live, and we knew it, we would do the most important things with the most important people, right? You would say the most important things that needed to be said. And that's what Jesus does in these last few days of his life. So in Luke chapter 19, he interacts with one of these very, very important people, and his name is Zacchaeus. And in just a moment, we're going to read Luke chapter 19, and we're going to read the whole story of this interaction between Jesus and Zacchaeus. But before we do, I want you to see just a high-level overview of this story, really through the lens of one of our resident theologians here at ET, and his name is Logan. Check it out.
Zacchaeus was a little man.
Not yet. All right. All right.
So, wait, what's that little thing?
It's a mic.
So what? It's a mic.
That's what's picking up your voice.
Oh, what? Why am I echoing? Oh, it's because of the mic. And this is connected to that. It's charging, and then it goes up to the mic.
All right. You ready, Logan?
Yeah.
You want to tell us your name?
Logan Marshall Singer.
And how old are you?
5.
5. All right. Now, you're here to tell us a story about who?
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus. All right. Go ahead. Tell us.
Zacchaeus was a little man. He climbed up in a tree because he wanted to see Jesus. Then he took people's money, and then he climbed up a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And then guess what he did?
What?
His life was changed. He invited Jesus over to his house, and not just his house, his heart too. And Zacchaeus' life was changed.
Is that it?
Yep.
That's the full story? Okay.
So I feel like we could just pray and leave. That is the whole story. So Jesus met Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus' life was changed. But we're going to read the whole story so you can get all the details, and then we'll unpack it for just a little bit. In Luke chapter 19, this is how the story reads in verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a good look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd, so he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. "Zacchaeus," he said, "come down. I must be a guest at your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down, took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy, but the people were displeased. "He's gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." Jesus responds, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost." Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but this past Tuesday, was tax day. So did you get your taxes filed? Are you in the government's good graces now? I hope that you did, or else you better throw yourself on the mercy of the IRS and ask for an extension. We don't like to pay taxes, do we? I mean, we like some of the things that taxes get for us. You know, we like the firefighters and we like the bridges and roads and those kinds of things. But nobody likes to pay their taxes, and I get it. I mean, we have this certain these emotions and thoughts around tax time and around tax people, right? People who take our money from us. And I remember when we lived in Texas, I met this guy at church one day, and I introduced myself to him. And I did what we probably shouldn't do, but we so often do, which is we introduce ourselves and we say, "Hi, my name is John, and I do this job. What do you do?" And he told me his name, and he said, "I'm an IRS agent." And I had never met an IRS agent before. I mean, I'd heard that these people exist, but I had never actually met one in the flesh, or at least not somebody who would admit to me that they were an IRS agent. And I have to admit that when he said that, I had this feeling inside that I can't explain, you know? Even though that's a perfectly legitimate job, and if you work for the IRS today, we love you. We need good, godly people with integrity in those roles, okay? But there is something in us that we cringe at the thought of somebody taking our money. And this story in Luke 19 just goes to show that nothing has changed in 2,000 years. We don't really like tax people today. They didn't like tax people back then. But there's something else that you need to know about Zacchaeus and the role that tax collectors played, because in their day, there weren't the kind of, laws that govern taxation that there are today. And so Zacchaeus wasn't just taking money from the people of Israel, the Jewish people, and sending them to the government that was going to invest that money in roads and bridges and firefighters and all the public services and parks that you might expect to come from your tax dollars. Instead, Zacchaeus would collect money from the people, the taxes, and he would send them off to a foreign government, Rome, who was the invading, occupying force in Israel. And that money would not be used in Rome. It would be used for Rome's conquest, to take over the world. And so the people had really, really, really bad thoughts about one of their own people, a Jew, taking money from other Jews. And I bet they probably thought of Zacchaeus, "Hey, you're a Jew by birth, but you ain't really one of us, because you're taking our money and you're sending it to our sworn enemy." So he was seen as a traitor, a sellout. And on top of that, not only was he taking the people's money and he was sending it to their sworn enemy, but tax collectors were known to take more than the people actually owed. So he would collect more from people than what they actually owed in order to line his own pockets. And the story tells us that he was very rich. He was obviously doing very, very well in this role. Not only was he the tax collector, he was the chief tax collector. He was the boss of all the tax collectors in that region. So he was very wealthy. But not only was he taking people's money and sending it away to Rome, and not only was he taking more than his fair share, this whole thing is very ironic because the name Zacchaeus means innocent and pure. But every single person who knew him saw through his name and they knew who he really was. They hated him. Had to. This whole story about Zacchaeus in Luke 19 is about the characteristics that identify people. You read through the story, it's amazing how much we learn in a very short little episode about Zacchaeus. We learn how people saw him, what they thought about him. We learn about the characteristics and the things that marked his life that made him who he was in the eyes of the people, and probably in his own eyes as well. And when I read this, I can't help but think that every single one of us have characteristics and markers about our life that define us. They become part of our identity. They make up who we are in the eyes of other people and in our own eyes too. When I think about that, I remember the Catholic priest Henry Nouwen, who was a priest and an author and a teacher. And he talked about 3 lies of identity that we often believe. The 3 lies are, I am what I do, I am what I have, and I am what people think about me. And it's interesting when you read Luke 19, you see all of these things show up in there. So as we talk about this for the next few minutes, I want you to just think about how these same lies show up in our lives sometimes, and how we give in our thoughts to believing these lies. The first lie is, I am what I do. What did Zacchaeus do? He was a tax collector, right? He was somebody who collected taxes for the enemy, and he sent the people's money away. He took people's money. That's what he did. He was good at his job. That's what he was known for. And if he would have believed the lie that I am what I do, that's where it would have ended. I am a tax collector. I take people's money for a living. That is what I do. And every single one of us at some point in our lives have struggled with believing this lie, I am what I do. We think about the job that we do, or maybe if you're a student, you think about your life as a student, and that comes to identify you. When you introduce yourself to people, they will ask you, tell me something about your life. And you say, well, I'm a student, or I work at this place. And if we're not careful, those things begin to identify who we are. I am a student. I am an athlete. I am a professional. I have this job. The danger with that is that it's possible for all those things to go away. It's possible that one day you will not be a student anymore, and it's possible for you to get laid off from your job or come to a place in your life where you retire, and if you've wrapped up your whole self and your whole identity in what you do, then you get to a place where you wonder, who in the world am I? Am I nobody? And on the other side of this argument is this. Some of you are in a place where you're not a student, you're unemployed, and you may even think of yourself as kind of in a season of floundering right now, where you don't really have direction, you don't really have purpose. And you too can give into this lie that I am what I do. And you may say, I don't have a job, I'm not in school, I don't have these things that give me purpose. Maybe that is a personal reflection on my life. Maybe I am purposeless. Maybe nobody wants me. Maybe this is everything that I'm ever gonna have is what I have right now. And you give into the lie that you are what you do. But the interesting thing is, when Jesus meets Zacchaeus and he goes to his home, Jesus sees through what Zacchaeus does. In the eyes of Jesus, Zacchaeus is not a tax collector. I mean, it's interesting when you think about it. Jesus himself never says, Zacchaeus, I see you as a tax collector. That's the narrative part that Luke writes to explain who Zacchaeus is. But Jesus never looks at him and says, Zacchaeus, when I look at you, I see that you're a person who takes people's money for a living. Instead, he looks through what Zacchaeus does and sees who he really is. And I want you to know today that Jesus sees through what you do or what you don't do. He sees who you really are. You are not what you do. And the second lie that we often believe is, I am what I have. Let's think about what Zacchaeus had. The text says that Zacchaeus was very rich. And again, we talked earlier about this, how he got rich because he took more than his fair share. He got rich because he would extort people for a living. Why would tax collectors take more than their fair share? Nobody made them do that. They did it because they could. They wanted to. They were lining their pockets. They were getting rich at the expense of other people. Why would they do that? Probably for the same reason you and I do the things that we do. We want more. We're not happy. We're not satisfied with what we have. We want more. We look at what we have. We say, I don't have enough. But if I just had this, if I just had that, then I would have happiness. I would have fulfillment. I would have enough. And so we work harder and we scheme and we try to position ourselves so that we can have more. Because we believe the lie, I am what I have. And it's interesting that after this interaction with Zacchaeus, we actually don't know what was said at Zacchaeus' house. We kind of see the beginning of the story and the end of the story, but we don't know about the conversation that they had while they were at Zacchaeus' house. I wish I could be a fly on the wall for that conversation. What we do know is that after that conversation with Jesus, something had so radically shifted in Zacchaeus' heart that he says, hey, you know what, Jesus, my heart has been so changed, you've made such a difference in my life, that now I'm going to give half my money to the poor, and out of the other half, I'm going to repay people that I've stolen from 4 times what I've taken from them. So something had changed in his life, and somehow, in the course of that conversation with Jesus, Zacchaeus got to a place where he could no longer say, I am what I have. Because if you say, I am what I have, you'll never give away what you have, because you need it. You need it to be who you are. But Zacchaeus came to a place that day where he said, I am not what I have. I'm going to give my money away. And I want to tell you today, you are not what you have. Some of you have a lot. That is not a reflection on your personal value. Some of you, when you look at your bank statement, it says 0. That also is not a reflection of your personal value. You are not what you have or what you don't have. There is only one thing that matters, and that is who God thinks you are. Speaking of who people think you are, this is the third lie. I am what people think about me. Now, we know what people thought about Zacchaeus, right? They hated him. They couldn't stand him. He was a crook. He was a thief. He was anything but his name, innocent and pure. He was someone who stood out in society. They didn't like him. But in addition to being a crook, in addition to being a tax collector, somebody that they saw as stealing their money, look what the text says in Luke chapter 19, verse 7. When Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house, it says, but the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. So in addition to the fact that they didn't like him because he was a tax collector, all the religious people were judging Zacchaeus and saying that in a culture where everything in our lives is about our alignment with God, here we have a guy who stands out. He may be a Jew by birth, but we don't claim him as one of us. He is a sinner, and not just a sinner, a notorious sinner. He is out of alignment with God. He is not one of us. That's what they thought about him. And the truth is, every single one of us is concerned about what people think about us. Every once in a while, I'll come across somebody who will say, I don't care what people think about me. I'm always like, yeah, right. Usually it's those people that are the most concerned what people think about them. And I'm right there with you, because I'm concerned what people think about me. And I can tell you that I've spent pretty much my whole life, it feels like, in image management, like making sure that people think I'm great. I can remember from the time I was very young, wanting to make sure that I impressed people, wanting to make sure that people knew that I was smart and that I was capable and that I had a great future ahead of me. And then as I became an adult and I became a professional, then I began to want people to know that I was competent and that I was skilled and that I was significant because of what I did. And this has caused me over the years to avoid taking risks, because I don't ever want to do something I'm going to fail at, because then I'm afraid that if I fail at it, then people will see me as a failure. And I avoid embarrassing situations because I'm just like deathly afraid of being embarrassed. And I think that, man, if I were to be embarrassed in front of a group of people, then they would think that I am, some kind of a moron or something, and that I'm not with it, that I don't have all my faculties about me, A few years ago, I was at an event here in town, actually. There was, I think, close to 1,000 people there. It was an international event. There were people here from all over the world. It was a professional gathering. And so the goal was that we were going to spend 8 hours together over the course of a day, sitting at chairs around tables where we could have conversations, sharing best practices and talking about our professional experience with these group of people from countries all over. So I had people at my table from South America and from Europe and from Asia. It was awesome. It was incredible. And I sat there for about 4 hours in the morning at that table, interacting with these folks, who had great conversation. And then I got up at lunch and I went to the restroom. And when I walked up to the sink to wash my hands, I looked in the mirror and realized that morning I had only shaved half of my face. And it wasn't like 1 day's worth of growth, it was like 4 or 5 days worth. It was obvious. It was obvious. And I remember I was mortified. I was like, oh my. I have been sitting at the table with these people from all over the world all morning engaged in serious conversation. And they're looking at me the whole time, and I've got half my face shaved. I mean, like, some of you've got the kind of laid-back personality that if you did that, you'd be like, oh, man, I can't believe that's so funny. Not me. I'm like, hiding in the stall, sucking my thumb. In the fetal position, I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. My life is over. And here's the worst thing. We weren't living here in town at the time, and I did not drive there that day. And so I was stuck there. I couldn't go anywhere. I had no razor. There's nobody I could call. And so I walked back out of the bathroom, and I sat back down at the table. And for the rest of the day, I interacted with those folks. And I thought about telling some of our foreign guests, like, hey, this is just what we do here in America. It's part of the culture. It's part of who we are. But I was mortified. And you know, I mean, the reality, friends, is that's kind of a funny example, but I do get embarrassed easily about that kind of stuff because I am so worried about what people will think about me. And yet, we all have things that are at a much deeper level than that in our lives that we're so worried. And if people saw this, or maybe it's something that people do see about you, and you're torn up about it because you think that when they see that thing about you, they identify that with you, and that identifies who you are. And it could be something about your body that you think, man, when people look at my body, they see this, and so they think that way about me. Or it could be maybe a past experience that you had in your life that people know about, and so word has gotten out about your experience, and so they identify you with that thing. Maybe you started a business and it didn't work out. You had to close the business, and you think, man, that was a failure, and so people identify me as a failure. Or I went bankrupt, and so people identify me with that. Or I have this condition, maybe you have a disability, and so you have come to identify yourself with that, and you think that when other people look at you, that's what they see. That becomes part of our identity. It becomes part of who we think we are because that's what other people think about us. I've often wondered if Zacchaeus struggled with this when he had this interaction with Jesus. When Jesus is walking by, and he looks up in the tree, and he calls him by name. And we don't have any indication that they knew each other, so might be pretty freaky for Zacchaeus. Jesus calls him by name and says, Zacchaeus, come down. I got to be a guest at your house today. And it says in the text that Zacchaeus received him with joy in his home. But I wonder if in the back of Zacchaeus' mind he was thinking, oh my goodness, this is really embarrassing because I know who I am. I'm a tax collector. None of these people like me. I know I'm a bad person. I know I do bad things. I know I cheat people and steal and all that kind of stuff. I know I'm hated by all my friends and neighbors. I know that. And I wonder if Jesus thinks about me what everybody else thinks about me. Sometimes we wonder. If everybody else hates me or if everybody else sees these characteristics about me and think about me in a certain way, does Jesus think that way about me too? So I wonder if that was kind of an awkward meal at Zacchaeus' house. You know, Zacchaeus is sitting there and wondering the whole time, what is Jesus thinking about me? There's a pastor and author named A.W. Tozer, and he wrote a lot about the Christian life and the Christian experience. And one of my favorite quotes of his is this. He says, what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. I think that's true. But I think the second most important thing is this. It's what you think God thinks about when he thinks about you. So what do you think God thinks about when he thinks about you? Do you think he sees the things that everybody else sees? You know, the things that identify you, whether it's your body type or body image, or whether it's an experience you've been through or a disability that you have or an experience that you've had. Maybe you were convicted of a crime and you spent time in prison, and so people know that, and you think, well, I'm just a convict. That's who people think I am. Or I struggle with addiction and people know that. And so when they look at me, they think I'm an addict. And I wonder if because that's how everybody else thinks about me, I wonder if that's how God thinks about me too. But it's interesting that Zacchaeus doesn't have to wonder for long. He finds out what Jesus thinks about him because in chapter 19, verse 8, Zacchaeus says, Jesus, I'm going to give half my wealth to the poor. Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I'll give them back 4 times as much. And the very next verse, listen to this. Jesus responded, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. What did Jesus think about Zacchaeus? This, you're a true son of Abraham. What does that mean? It means whereas everybody else in his culture and his city may have said, hey, you're a Jew by birth, but you ain't one of us because you're a traitor, you're a sellout, and you're a notorious sinner. Jesus looked at the response of Zacchaeus' heart that was evidenced on the outside by him giving his money and possessions away. And Jesus pronounced, you are a true son of Abraham. That means Zacchaeus, you are a true follower of God. You're a true Jew. You're somebody, you're the real deal. Your heart has shown, your actions have shown that you are really a believer in God, and salvation has come to your home today. And I think some of you in this room, you may be wondering, what does God think about me? And you may be thinking, God probably is, looking down on you with contempt, thinking about you the same things that everybody else thinks about you, but friend, that's not true. God is crazy about you. He loves you. You know how I know? Because the very last verse of this whole passage, Luke 19:10, Jesus says, for the Son of Man, talking about himself, has come to seek and save the lost. In other words, this was Jesus' way of saying, what I have done for Zacchaeus, I now want to do for everybody. All the Zacchaeuses, all the people who are lost, all the people who are broken, all the people who have been identified by what they do or what they have or what other people think about them or what they think about themselves. Jesus says, I have come to bring salvation. Just like I did to Zacchaeus' home, Jesus can bring salvation to your home as well. And I know how crazy Jesus is about you and how much he loves you because of what happens when this whole story is over. See, when Jesus finishes interacting with Zacchaeus, he leaves this town called Jericho and he walks on to Jerusalem, where he is arrested, tried multiple times, nailed to a cross, and ultimately killed. And the Bible says he is crucified on that cross. He lays his life down as a sacrifice for the sins of the world, for your sins and mine, because every single one of us have sinned. So if you've ever wondered what God thinks about you, that's what he thinks about you. He loves you so much. Jesus said it himself in John 3:16. Which basically says this: God loved the world and he loved you so much that he sent his one and only son to give his life on a cross, to lay down his life for your sin so that you could be saved, so you could be forgiven, so that you could have right relationship with God the Father again. And Easter is the celebration of the fact that not only did Jesus give his life by being nailed to a cross for our sin, but 3 days later, after he was put in a tomb, he was miraculously risen from the grave by the power of God. And in that, God proved in the life and resurrection of Jesus that death had no power over him, and that once again the door was open, the pathway was open for us to have connection and relationship with God the Father. So if you've ever wondered what God thinks about you, that's what he thinks. He loves you so much that he would be willing to sacrifice himself by sending his son so that you could be saved.
Thanks again for watching the service today. I hope it was an encouragement to you. We'd love to hear from you, so if you'd like to leave a note in the comments and let us know what you thought about the message, we'd love that. And if you're ever in the Springfield, Missouri area on a Sunday morning, we'd love to have you join us for church. You can attend our 8 a.m. classic service, or you can join us for church at 9:30 or 11.